Every once in a while, a backyard barbecue warrior is able to realize his dream, making the leap from the backyard to the pit house, and being recognized as one of the top pitmasters in the country.
So I worked for a technology reseller when we were up in Chicago. Me and Kimmy got married a little less than a year after we got engaged, and we bought a house, and we started kind of talking about our life and how we wanted to raise our kids, and we decided that we'd love for Kimmy to be able to stay at home, and we ended up getting to a point where it was nice, it was comfortable, but I just grew so tired, and it just didn't fulfill me anymore. You know, I had everything I needed. I had all the money I could ever need to pay bills and go on vacation and do the things we wanted to do and provide for my family. But at the end of the day, I had a hard time like looking at myself in the mirror and being like happy with what I was doing. I had always wanted to start a business. Now, barbecue and that were separate ideas. You know, I never thought opening a restaurant would be the way I would go. I kind of thought I'd open up some kind of tech spin-off company, but it started to click the more and more we did the backyard barbecues that people were like, man, this is like the best barbecue I've ever had. Like not just brisket, but like everything. I was cooking pulled pork and ribs, and the ribs were terrible, but people loved them, you know, the flavor of them. And I was buying like raw sausages from Costco and cooking those and smoking those and kind of trying to turn them into like craft sausages, even though they were pre-made, you know, and doing brisket. And people just kept telling me more and more and more that you need to sell, you need to do something with this.
For most of us, smoking meat in our backyard for friends and neighbors is just about as good as it gets. So how did a tech salesman turn a weekend passion into a thriving business that caught the attention of Texas Monthly's Daniel Vaughn? We're about to find out. I'm on a journey to become the best cook that I can be. And on that journey, I've gotten to meet some truly remarkable people. And what I'm finding over and over again is maybe I'm not the only one on this journey. Hey Nick.
What's up, Al? How you doing, buddy?
Good, man. Good to see you.
Yeah, just meet me at the side door. I'll show you around. All right.
You know, this is kind of a cool story for me to tell because it's not new to me. I actually met Nick in 2021 when he was doing pop-ups at the axe throwing place. I saw a post on Instagram about the pop-up, and it was Texas style barbecue here in North Carolina, and I'd only lived here for about a year at that point. And I looked and there was a phone number and it was a Chicago area code, and I thought, how cool, like here's somebody else from Chicago, because I spent 20 years in Chicago. And I came by, and I'll tell you, like the food I tasted back then 4 years ago, like it's not the level of the food today, but it was really impressive enough for me to keep coming back. And so I've seen this grow from a guy that's basically me, middle-class guy in his backyard doing barbecue with everybody telling him how good his barbecue is and someday he should open a restaurant, except instead of staying in his middle-class job and continuing down that path as a hobby or doing what I did and jumping out into the YouTube world, he actually did it. Like he actually took the leap, sold all his stuff, bought a food truck, and he built it from like, I'm gonna do weekend pop-ups all the way to what you see today. And this is a different story than I grew up in barbecue, or I'm fourth generation pitmaster like Blacks, or the folks at Goldie's who, you know, all grew up around barbecue, grew up together, worked in all the barbecue places, learned the craft, and then came together and opened their own place. Like this is you and me.
So I was born in St. Louis. Growing up, barbecue in a St. Louis way was a big part of our family. Pork steaks was always like the tried and true, what we always had growing up for dinner, or and so that's the food kind of area that we kind of grew up in. So much pork steak growing up that I didn't really realize that you could get like a ribeye or a New York strip, or so I didn't realize you could get like a beef steak. So about 2001, 2002-ish, we picked up and moved down to Dallas, and I have a ton of memories of going to Dickey's and going to, I don't even know, some of the other places that were around. I just don't remember. I was too young. But I do remember going to Trail Dust Steakhouse. I remember they had this huge like 2-story slide that you could go down on a burlap sack while you're waiting for your food, and they had these crazy like 64-ounce steaks you could get from the menu. It was like the most Texas restaurant you could imagine. And that's one of my, when I think about Texas, that's probably the most influential experience I remember from that period of my life. Halfway through 8th grade is when we moved up to Chicago. And I was in Chicago from 8th grade until post-college. I met my wife and before I moved down here. So the bulk of my life was spent in Chicago. And I think Chicago has a very special food scene. And I don't know if I want to say this, but I would maybe argue even my more enjoyed food, even more so than barbecue, would be like Chicago, like staples, you know, like Italian beef, hot dogs, that type of stuff.
I've known Nick for a few years now. Needless to say, I've tasted more than my fair share of his brisket. Even now though, I'm in awe that this guy, who's in total command of his craft, has only been doing this a short time. 5 years ago, you're cooking in the backyard on a cheap offset smoker.
Yeah.
Watching videos on YouTube, learning how to cook. And fast forward now, 5 years later, you're the guy that Texas Monthly says makes the best brisket in North Carolina. Like, that's quite an adventure you've been on.
It is, man.
And now, like, this is top level. This is shepping level stuff.
I appreciate it.
Nice job. And you're gonna teach me how you do this.
I will.
Okay.
I will.
A lot of food on here. What should we taste next?
I'd go with the Italian beef. Oh, it's nice and hot, you know?
So there's some history here, because I lived 20 years in Chicago. You lived for a while in Chicago. That's where we both picked this up. All right.
Well,
so
I hope you enjoy it.
This soggy sandwich, for those of you who are watching, this is intentional. This isn't a mistake. It's not like the beef just leaked. We actually dip the whole sandwich.
Yeah, we dip the whole
right.
sandwich in the jus and just get a all nice full flavor in there.
All right, here we go. Wow. It's a Chicago beef with smoke. There's
This is
a
one of my
smoke
favorites.
ring in an Italian beef sandwich.
Yeah.
This is great, and I can't wait to learn from you. So what are we gonna learn? We're gonna learn Texas brisket.
We're gonna learn the Texas brisket.
Okay.
Teach you kind of how we trim and how we go about cooking it to get the flavors that we're looking for.
Right.
We're gonna do the smoked Italian beef, and then the last thing we're gonna do is we're gonna do a St. Louis style pork steak.
I guess it's time to go learn, huh?
Yeah.
All right.
Of course.
Good. So what's different about your trim than what we've seen other places?
I don't know maybe what's different. We're pretty aggressive with the trim. I'm a big believer in not just trimming a brisket just to trim a brisket, just because you want it to look like everybody else's, but understanding how your cooker cooks. So like, for example, like we leave a little bit more fat on these now that we cook on the Syntex than we did on the Primitive, because this renders fat better. So if I'm cooking 40 briskets, for example, I know I can fit 30 on that and 10 over there, then those 10 I'll try to set aside and trim differently for the Primitive.
More aggressively.
Yeah, trim a little bit more fat off and shape it around, make sure it's a little bit more aerodynamic and all that kind of good stuff for that cooker.
So for those of us doing this in our backyard,
Yeah,
we're not gonna have Syntex like airflow. Get a little bit less fat.
yeah, a
keep
little
the
bit less fat or more fat depending on kind of what it is. If it's a top down or bottom down cooker like a Kamado or like a pellet grill or something where you have a heat source, even if it convects a little bit, leave a little bit more fat if you know you're going to go fat side down for a little while. Kind of go through and kind of talk about how we do it. So the first thing we'll do is, but I like to look at it and kind of understand my vision for like how I want it to look when it's done. And so I see like this guy's got a decent sized decal, so I'm going to take that off. And I don't necessarily carve into it, more so find kind of what's going to make it flush on the bottom and then just cut kind of straight across. Next, what I'll do is this oxidized part off from the bottom side. And when you do it, kind of run your knife at an angle and leave that fat exposed. But for mine, because this meat pushes out from the fat, I'm going to take it off from this side.
Okay.
So that way I can get it and create kind of my angled like edge of that flat. Now, the next thing I always do is take care of the Mohawk. This one is huge on this side.
Yeah.
So I'll kind of find where it connects here at the bottom and take it from that. And then once I get to the top, because it's hanging so far over the side of the brisket, I'm just gonna take it and cut all that off. All right, so next step is kind of rounding off the corners. I've got a little gnarly thing hanging off here. So I'm legitimately taking off like just enough to round out these corners.
Okay.
So now we've kind of got like our general shape of our brisket. Now I'm gonna start kind of looking at how thick this fat is. I like doing this sort of method. But it also ensures you can keep some of that fat as it comes off the side.
Right.
Because in my best case scenario, I've got my fat trimmed to where I want it to be, but I've also got fat along this side of the brisket. I like having
that's interesting.
fat
So that's
wrapped.
very different than the way other people do it, because most people expose the meat on the side. That's a new technique for me.
So like this guy right here is done. As you pinch that fat,
Right.
this guy had a lot on it. But yeah, if you can kind of pinch, like the meat's not going to do that. So like you pinch it, it gives you a decent idea of like how deep you can go. It's also the quality of the brisket. The fat renders, I mean, the fat just gets so soft.
Yeah.
That's the one downside to not kind of like setting the edge on the other side is kind of getting a feel for
Right.
how thick that fat is.
Well, that's
but
what I'm used to doing, is taking it down, and then I know what
Yeah.
I'm doing. All right, so we got a big hunk of meat here.
yes. So this is a top round.
Right.
So it comes from the hind leg of the cow. We'll just kind of get it processed here. Our main goal right now is we're just getting it into smaller, manageable sized chunks that will slice nicely on the deli slicer. So
Good.
my main focus here is we're not cooking this like a brisket. So we're not taking this to 200 internal. We're taking it to like maybe 125, 130.
Okay.
So all this fat has to go. Anything in the middle that is not going to be pleasant to eat, we need to pull out, because we're not cooking it enough to render out any of that stuff. And I want to get as much smoke on here as I can, and I want the smoke on the meat. Because when you eat a roast beef sandwich, you don't want to eat a bunch of fat. Yeah.
Right. Is this typically the meat that's used for the Chicago beef
It is.
sandwich? It's always the top round?
Yep. Now that we've gotten it to this point where we've cleaned up a lot of that fat, we've cleaned up any like tendons or anything in here that's not going to be very pleasant. I just like to cut it into 4 quarters. And then that
Probably get
also
more
way
smoke on
I get
it,
more
too.
smoke.
Yeah.
The way I've kind of processed it there makes to where when I put it on the deli slicer and this face is on the slicer, we slice it against the grain.
Slice against the grain.
Yep.
So
And so
final
that's
slice.
what I've noticed. Being able to do
It's
it like
amazing
that.
how many people don't get that.
I know. But now that we've got this all kind of cut up and ready to go,
Right.
we'll just get it seasoned and we'll throw it on the smoker.
Pork steaks.
Yes.
All right, this is not something that a lot of people have seen in the barbecue community, right?
Yeah. So it's a little bit unique. I know it's starting to get more popular as more places are starting to do them, and definitely a cheaper cut, but it's not lacking in flavor. What I would try to explain to people kind of why they're so unique is pork fat and beef fat are completely different
Right.
in the way that they react chemically, you know?
Right.
And so pork lard caramelizes real nice. And so it develops a much different flavor than you'd expect on the outside of these. And so
Right.
you almost kind of get that kind of bacony, kind of sweet and salty flavor on the outside of these that you just don't get with a steak. But this is something we grew up with in St. Louis. They're essentially a steak cut from the pork shoulder or the pork
Right.
butt,
Right.
cut kind of in line with the collar or the shoulder blade.
Okay.
We cut ours kind of like a happy medium between what you'd find in St. Louis and what you'd find in Texas.
No, you said cut your own. Now you've got to cut your own because these are hard to find, right?
They are.
Like I can't get them here. You probably can get them from a wholesaler if you're willing to pay more.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, they charge us a lot more if we want
yeah.
them pre-cut. Barbecue kind of entered the picture when Bryce bought me a Weber. I had started doing a lot of barbecue on that, cooking pork butts, cooking this, cooking that, doing some indirect stuff with pork loin and messing around with reverse seared steaks and all that kind of good stuff. I had some other buddies that were working with me that were into it, so that kind of helped spark more of an interest.
Theory behind the seasoning. I see pepper in your hand. You're not
Yeah.
pre-mixing your rub.
Yeah, so we don't pre-mix it because I noticed it was hard to keep track of how much salt we were getting on the briskets.
Okay.
And it was getting too spotty. Like we would have some briskets that have a good coverage and some that would have not as much, you know? So we made this switch a long time ago.
Now you got pepper in your hand.
yeah.
So we're gonna be putting pepper on first, which
Yep.
I usually put salt on first and do them separately. So I assume
So-
you're Mr. Experiment.
Yeah.
So I assume you tried salt
We
first and
tried
pepper
salt
first.
first, but the pepper doesn't stick if there's too much salt on there. So if we do pepper first, the pepper will stick, and then salt sticks to anything. So the
Okay.
salt just sticks
And no
right on
problem
top.
with salt penetration getting through the
No,
pepper. That's
no.
just fine.
Yeah.
Okay.
The bottoms aren't crazy important. I mean, we put a decent amount on there, so you'll see it.
No, I see we're getting the sides there.
Yeah, I prefer it. I've noticed I like it. I can tell when there's no pepper on the sides. I won't heavily salt the sides.
Okay.
Like I won't go through and pick up every single one and make sure the salt gets on the sides, but I try to do that with the pepper.
All right, so salt is a religion.
Yeah.
Which kosher salt are we using?
Diamond Crystal.
Diamond Crystal,
Yeah.
okay. So if you had to guess, is there a quantity guideline here? Like with Morton's, I tell people a teaspoon per pound. You're probably using a little bit less than that here, or if people are gonna try to recreate this, pay close attention to the footage that we're getting, because it's really a visual thing for you.
Yeah, it's really a visual thing.
Yeah.
But I would say we try to go for like a 2 parts pepper to 1 part salt. So like when we make our burgers, that's what we'll do. And we'll just put the salt and pepper in a bucket, and we'll just put the burgers in there. Kind of like a similar salt level with that as we do with this. And that's by volume, not by weight.
Not by weight. Okay.
So same philosophy here. I try to get most of it covered in 1 or 2 passes, just so I'm not like going all over the place with it, and it doesn't get kind of spotty.
But you got a little bit heavier coat here.
So this is Fiesta Seasonal.
So this is your choice of seasoning salt, and I'm assuming you've experimented with Lowry's and Fiesta and
I've tried
whatever else.
Tried quite a few different ones. I can't even remember the other names of them, but yeah, we started with Lowry's, and then we kind of just bounced around and tried a bunch of them. I found this one. I like it because it's not super salty. So like you can lick this. I don't know if you've ever done that before, but you can like put this on your tongue and it doesn't burn your tongue. And I like the flavors of it. I feel like it's got a little bit more of like a Mexican spice undertone to it. So I think it complements the meat well, you know. But we go pretty heavy.
Oh, you do?
With this.
You know, I notice as good at this as you are and as efficient as you are taking your time, making sure that each brisket is exactly right. Like, you're not rushing through, even though you've got a table full of briskets and the sun's coming up and you got to get them on.
I care more about the quality of it than I do paying somebody an extra hour, an extra couple hours to make sure that the job gets done right, you know. So this is our homemade Italian seasoning.
Okay.
So it is half oregano, half salt, equal parts. Okay. And then I throw a couple tablespoons of onion powder, garlic powder, about 2 tablespoons of red pepper flake, and then about 1 tablespoon, or maybe a little bit more, like a heaping tablespoon of fennel seed. Okay. And then that's it. When we season this, just kind of mix it up so it's all well incorporated. I shook it around for about 5 minutes just to make sure it was all even. And then we're just going to go on pretty liberally all the way around. You can't over season this, because if you think about when it's getting sliced, there's going to be such a small amount of bark actually in each bite that you're not going to be able to over season it.
Okay. That's a pretty big piece of meat too.
Yeah, exactly.
Let's talk seasoning. What are we doing? Pepper, salt, seasoned salt.
Yep, just keep it real simple. I want the pork to kind of be the star of the show. So we're not going to go crazy heavy on it. And we will do seasoned salt on both sides of these. I'm not going to worry about the sides on these just because they're so thin. We'll just do the top and the bottom.
Okay. Yeah, I guess they're not going to be on there long enough for the pepper to develop a bark on the fat, are they?
No, not quite. They're not going to develop the same kind of bark either, just because it's direct heat. Yeah. And they're not getting like quote unquote smoke that you would get on an offset smoker. But they definitely will get a good amount of color. And they will develop a crust, just not the same as they would if they were on the offset. Right. Alrighty. So that's just about done. And then we're going to go ahead and move them on over to the VQ.
What's the saying? Behind every great man, there's an even better woman. Well, that rings particularly true in this case.
We were co-workers, yes. So we grew up close to each other, having no idea, and ended up in this tech job. And it was kind of just I guess, a meet cute for us. Looking back on it, I would say it was love at first sight. It took a couple months for us to officially start our relationship and start dating exclusively.
We ended up getting married a little less than a year after we got engaged, and we bought a house, and about a month after, or 2 months after we got married, we got pregnant with Asher, which is our oldest. We started talking about our life and how we wanted to raise our kids, and we decided that we'd love for Kimmy to be able to stay at home. Big reason we took the job down here in North Carolina was to kind of move to that next step, you know, and I could provide a better middle-class lifestyle for my family. We could afford to live in a nice neighborhood. We could afford to live in a nice town. After kind of moving down here, buying a house, and we've gotten settled down into a nice life. 2 years into living in North Carolina, and the barbecue scene here was so different than what we were used to, and I really enjoyed it at first, and I grew to kind of miss the beef, you know, and so we started doing it at home. I messed around with a few different smokers. I had a Weber Smoky Mountain. I just used my Weber, and then eventually, after watching 10,000 hours of Mad Scientist Barbecue and Jeremy, I bought a Brazos, started cooking on that, and I think that's when it started to click. We'll go the opposite side from the Mohawk against the walls.
Okay.
So I try to keep this against the back wall and against the door, because I want the decal facing the middle of the smoker.
Right.
So like the majority
Just
of
in the middle. Okay.
Yeah, we're gonna get enough convection on the outside to
Right.
render the fat, and this fat's a lot softer, so it's not gonna take as much heat to
Okay.
render. Whereas the decal fat's a lot harder. That's why you use it for sausage and
Right.
burgers. And it takes a lot more heat to get that stuff to render out. And so if we put it in the middle, like facing the middle, like
Right.
they don't have to be in the middle of the smoker, they just have to be
Oh,
facing the middle.
facing the center line.
Yeah, like we're gonna get hot spots along the walls and all that, but it's on average, it's gonna be hotter down the middle of the
Okay.
smoker. So that's what we've noticed. It renders better if we do it that way.
Have you found that to be true on your backyard smokers too, or is that just really when you get to the big Centexes?
That's really when we
and
get to the
everything
big
else?
ones, yeah. When we've got
Okay.
multiple, and we're cooking 15 briskets, and we want to
Okay.
be.
So when I'm cooking at home on a Yoder or
Yeah.
whatever, I don't have to
I
pay
would
as much
still,
attention to
I
that.
would still, if you're cooking at home, I would still put this side against the wall if you can.
Okay.
Now, you're not always going to have the luxury of having
Right.
a brisket. If you put it right in the middle, you're going to be fine. And then also too, like any that I know have like a nice fat cap. So like this guy's got a little bit more than a 1/4 inch of fat on it. So if I know that the fat's thicker on this side, I'll put it on the back.
On the back. Okay.
Because we'll have a little bit more heat back here. Not necessarily hotter, but it'll be more sustained. You know, when I open
Right.
the doors, it's not going to cool off.
Okay.
And then now that we're down to like just big boys, we'll try to keep them. But like
Okay.
you can see, like all 4 of these are all the same.
Right.
So we're kind of getting to the point now where we can't do that as much.
Right.
I'll put this guy. So we're just gonna, there's no rhyme or reason to it really, just putting it on there. It's not gonna cook long enough for anything to get crispy or burnt, as long as I'm not running a like 325-degree fire.
Right.
We're just getting it on there so we can get some smoke, and then we'll check on it in about 2.5 hours.
All right. So this is different than the other stuff. We're not cooking on an offset.
Yep.
We've actually got coals down here, right?
Yep, so we've got coals down beneath the food. The only thing that's hard to replicate in the backyard with this is the distance between the food and the coals. 2.5 feet between
Right.
the food and the heat. So that part's the only hard part to replicate.
Okay.
Like I've had a hard time doing these similar to this at home without a direct heat pit that's got a little bit more space. You can do it on a Weber if you lift the meat up off the grill, like with something else.
So what if I did like a Kamado with a raised rack?
Yeah.
Would that be better than, like, I get the Santa Maria, but that's open.
Yeah.
It's not gonna try.
If you do in the Kamado and remove all the heat displacement
Right.
stuff and raise it up to
Get
the
it as far-
top and just keep the coal bed manageable, you'd be fine. You just
Okay.
want to keep, you don't want it to get too hot because you'll get flare-ups and it'll catch on fire.
Got it.
But you definitely want to get them as far away from the heat as possible.
Right. And we don't want to do this on an offset because the fat rendering into the coals.
Yeah.
That's
Well, it's
part
just
of the
complete,
flavor,
yeah,
right?
it's just completely different. Like the direct heat, like the ambient temperature in here might be 250, but that heat coming off the coals is going to be a lot hotter.
Right.
And so it's creating more caramelization that you just won't get on an offset. Plus you miss out on the coals dripping. or
Right.
the fat dripping in the coals,
Okay.
which really adds a bunch of flavor to these.
Okay.
I think why it's such a popular method of cooking like around the world.
Right.
It's just because you get that extra flavor from it.
And when I do it on my
Watch 'em.
Kamado, 250 is my
I would go
target
lower
pit
than that.
temp. Oh, you go
Yeah,
lower.
I'd go lower
Okay.
than that. I'd
200,
go like
225?
200,
200. Okay.
210,
Okay.
somewhere
220,
around there.
221.
Yeah, because you have
whatever it
to.
takes.
I don't know exactly how the airflow works in those, but it's that residual heat's going to be a lot hotter.
Got it.
Especially with it dripping down, it's going to flare up.
Right.
But I would definitely play around with it. We played
Okay.
around with it over the years.
So the barbecue hobby had started in the Midwest, and it followed us. So I knew it was real that he wanted to keep going with this as a hobby at the time. And as we grew our community,
We started messing around with it and inviting friends over,
people we were hanging out with, weekend barbecues just became part of it.
and I think we were doing like a cookout every once a month, maybe even more than that, just practicing.
I would cook the sides, he would smoke the meats, we would invite people over, and it was just so much fun. And then COVID hit, and suddenly that tech job just lost more and more interest, and just, you could see that light kind of going out there.
I think I identified why corporate America felt so unfulfilling was being in sales. I just felt like I was constantly getting on people's nerves. I was constantly like doing something that made someone else unhappy. And I realized that like the barbecue made people happy, and I think that's where I realized how barbecue could become a business that would not just be something that could potentially provide for my family, but would be fulfilling for me, was to do something that people were happy to experience.
All right, so you got something in your hand there that we don't see very often in barbecue joints anymore, a spritz bottle.
Yeah, so we spritz. We don't do it very often. We just kind of do it throughout the cook. I like doing it after the first 4 or 5 hours, just to kind of get the bark wet so the seasoning doesn't fall off and flake off. Because we put a lot of seasoned salt, a lot of pepper, a lot of salt on there. So if we don't do it and it dries out too early, it'll fall off.
Okay.
So we'll kind of show you. This is kind of where we're at after about 4 hours. You can see it's starting to get nice and dark. You can kind of see where I'm talking about, where this is starting to get dry on the surface. That's going to happen. That's not bad.
Right.
But just because we put so much of that seasoning on there, you'll start to see as the brisket kind of shrinks a little bit, which these have already done, that seasoning will start to clump together. And
Interesting.
if we don't spritz, it could fall off.
Okay.
So we're not doing anything too crazy. We're just kind of hitting it. You can see it as it
Right.
gets hydrated, it changes colors.
No, it's going to evaporate pretty quickly.
It will.
I'm sure.
It
So-
will. Once the briskets start to render, which you can kind of already see, where it's starting to get a little bit
Right.
wet and glistening. The fat's already starting to want to do something like those pork butts back there.
Right.
And so we're just trying to get it to that point where once the fat starts to render, we won't have to really worry about the outside staying hydrated.
Okay. And now this has got some color to it. So this isn't just water. You're doing water and
Water,
ACV?
yep, apple cider vinegar.
Okay. 50-50, more ACV, more...
About 50-50. Yeah,
Okay.
just kind of eyeball. It's not a strict, it doesn't do anything for flavor. It doesn't do anything. Apple cider vinegar is expensive.
Yep.
So I don't want to waste too much if I don't have to.
Makes total sense.
So we've got a little unique of a mop. So it's got a little bit of red onion in there, butter, a lot of butter, Texas Pete, Worcestershire sauce, vinegar, some mustard powder, and paprika. And
So we've got a good crust on them before we're mopping them. So
Yeah.
did I miss you mopping it once, or
No.
is that a natural smoke crust and now we're
No,
gonna
this
get...
is natural
Yeah, that's natural.
flavor just from all the wood.
So how far will you take these?
So we will take them to about 198, 200-ish.
Okay.
So you want to take them as close to pulling them as possible without them
Right.
falling apart, just so they
Wow.
stay nice and tender.
Like, having tasted your pork steaks, I never would have guessed you took them that far.
Yeah.
That's so you're rendering out everything. You're getting the collagen
As
to
best
break
as we
down
can,
as
yeah.
best as you can.
Yeah, as best as we can
Okay.
without them burning, without them falling apart. Just because there's a lot of collagen in them. I'm not going to put any more coals on them.
Okay.
Want to let that backside get a little bit more color on it, and then I'll push them a little bit further. When they're done, we'll just hit them with a little bit of sauce. I'll throw some more coals under there so that sauce can kind of caramelize a little bit. Okay. And then they'll be done.
So we got what, another half hour or so?
Yeah, maybe.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
So when we started off, we were kind of humming around 225,
right,
maybe pushing 250, but the main focus was on the smoke. We pushed it up to about 275 a couple hours ago, and now we're getting close to 300. So we finish our briskets at that 300 temperature.
Okay.
We'll usually go for a little while at 300 before we wrap, and then we push 300, maybe 315 post wrap. Because our goal is to try to get them off the smoker as quickly as we can after we wrap them.
Right.
Just so we're not in there for too long. We're not losing too much moisture. But that's why we wrap, so we can do that, so they're protected. So we can get that done, and it kind of allows us to get that final push on rendering the fat.
Okay. So this is more of a traditional 225, 250, 275, and then you're gonna push it higher than the folks that are saying 275 the whole way or 225 the whole way.
Yeah.
You're doing the appropriate, and you find that 300, 315 renders differently?
It does. It does. The fat renders. It needs higher temperatures to render. And it's not so much that outer fat, it's that collagen that connects the muscles together. So it's been a little while since we've looked at them. We've got a really, really great dark bark at this point. And you can kind of see how this fat is starting to bubble. It's starting to render, or it is very, very well rendered at this point. So what we're looking for prior to wrapping is this fat. You see up here how it's real nice and soft?
Yeah.
We're looking for that all the way around. So this is still a little bit bouncy. So this has still got a little ways to go. And this stuff, if I pinch this apart, you see that golden color?
Yeah.
That's kind of what we're looking for. Because when you wrap the briskets, that external fat's it's not gonna stop rendering, but it's not gonna render the same way.
Right.
And so we want that to be done, if not close to done, prior to wrapping. So that way we ensure we don't have to just have blind faith that it's going to keep rendering, but we know it's rendered properly before we wrap them up.
So the color down here tells us we're done, but you said we're not quite done. What was it that tells you we're not quite done?
We've still got some bouncy fat
Okay.
here on the side, especially right here.
Right.
Whereas like there's still, I mean, that's a little bit thinner fat, so it probably is muscle I'm feeling under there.
Right.
But we still have just a tiny, tiny bit way to go. There's still a little bit of resistance right here. I mean, if you want to touch it, you can kind of feel what I'm talking about, where it's like, you can feel it's getting ready to give.
Right, but it's not quite there yet.
Quite ready there.
Yeah.
Just yet.
And we're not worried about the meat yet. We're worried about the fat.
Yeah, we're worried about the fat.
Okay.
Whereas this guy, if I would have pushed my finger hard enough, you can see how it's just going to give away.
Right.
There's not much resistance there.
So this one might be ready?
Not quite yet. And the reason I know that is because when I pull it apart, you can see it's starting to yellow on the top, but underneath that you can see there's still some white.
So it hasn't rendered down yet.
So we want to render it down a little bit further.
Okay. How much of the quality of the brisket do you think is in this part of the process deciding when to pull it? Like, is this you're going to take a perfectly good brisket and screw it up if you pull it too early or too late? Or are we talking about minor changes now?
I think you're not going to screw it up if you do it too early or too late. But I think if you do it too early, you're going to lose out on that sweetness from the fat. If you pull it too early, you're going to have a little bit of fat that's not quite rendered as much.
Okay.
And you're going to lose out on that sweet flavor that you get from that like nice yellow, brown rendered fat. Because that's what creates that nice sweet flavor.
All right, so this is your sauce.
Yeah, so that's our sauce. We just water it down with like, a 1/4 cup of vinegar.
So I'm gonna have to take a bottle of that with me.
Yeah. And we're just, these are done cooking already,
Right.
but we're just hitting it with a little bit of the sauce. You can kind of smell that smoke from the sauce kind of coming up. And we'll just let this tack up for just 5-10 minutes.
Okay.
And then
Just on one side.
I've already did the
you
other
already
side.
did the other side.
Yeah,
Okay.
I just flipped them over. But we'll shut the door, let them go for 10 minutes, and then we'll just take them off. And then they're good to go. We'll let them rest, and then we'll slice into them.
Okay, how long do they have to rest?
About 25-30 minutes.
Okay. Mastering your backyard barbecue game is one thing. Getting good enough to do weekend pop-ups and have people actually pay you for your barbecue, even more impressive. But turning a barbecue hobby into a career is a whole different story.
So when we first started doing pop-ups, December of 2020, we had saved up a little bit of money to put the down payment on the primitive. We had started cooking more briskets at home, probably once a week. We were doing a brisket on the weekends, just trying to hone the craft. And it was just like, ever since then, we did a pop-up every Saturday and kind of never looked back. The intention from the beginning was that this was gonna be it. You know, like we're not just gonna do pop-ups so I can feel good about myself on the weekends. It was, this is it. And so we started in June of 2021, and I quit my job November of 2021. Looking back, it was a crazy decision, but I think it helped, you know, because it forced us to be more regular with our pop-ups. It forced us to pick up gigs where we could get them, and, you know, it kind of pushed us into becoming something that people looked forward to on the weekends, and people would follow us around all over Raleigh, and we built some good relationships with breweries and axe throwing places and different venues around the state. And eventually over time we kind of honed in on a few, like 2 or 3 places that we regularly visited. So these, you can tell when they kind of want to fall apart. There's not like a cold hard science to it, but
we can see it.
Well, you can see how loose it is. That's kind of what I'm looking for, because I know that collagen's about giving up. You can tell if I wanted to, I could just shred this apart, but
you
it
could
still
pull it, but it's not
holds its integrity.
right.
Other than that one,
As you say, holds its integrity.
yeah,
That's
enough.
all right.
It does enough.
All right. Now, do these get covered in the warmer or just into the warmer like this?
I'll cover them.
Okay.
And then we'll let them rest for a minute,
They
and then
smell delicious.
I know I can barely smell them.
I can
It's a
smell 'em.
shame.
So
Yeah, they smell really good. But yeah,
All
I'll go
right,
throw
so
these in the
half
warmer.
hour.
We'll come back in about half hour, 25 minutes or so, and we're good to go.
all right, I can't wait to taste these. All right, so we don't have to wait till tomorrow because we got pork steak.
Yeah.
No, I've tasted your pork steak and it was delicious. This looks different though.
I think the last time you had it, we were kind of messing around with some stuff, but this is kind of how we traditionally do it. A St. Louis pork steak is just a little bit different. You know, it's going to have a lot more of a caramelized crust on it. It's cooked with a lot more, I guess, higher flame. We've got a lot more, we got sauce and mop on there. So there's a lot of stuff going on in terms of like caramelizing and making the bark what it is. So like what makes the pork steak so special is you kind of get like all of the factors of what makes barbecue so good, all in the same bite. You get a little bit of smoke, you get a little bit of that direct heat flavor, the fat hitting the coals. We got a mop on there, we've got some sauce on there. And this is very true to form, like St. Louis style pork steak.
Okay, cheers. Dude, you did it.
Thank you.
What's different is the outside of the steak. The inside tastes very similar,
Yeah.
but what you've done with the mop and the sauce, it's hard to describe. It's kind of like with really good ribs, you've got a little bit of sweetness to cut the fat,
Yeah.
and you've got that here. It's not sweet. It's not like candy ribs. It
Right.
just is the right balance. Nice job.
Thank you.
There's no way I'm going to be able to do this, but I'm going to try. But this will tide us over. This is a good meal
Yeah,
to get us
no, it
through
really is.
briskets finishing and getting through the night where the sun goes down, and a little taste to last us till tomorrow, right?
Yeah, no, for sure, man. For sure. But this is, I mean, this is what we grew up with, you know, and we don't do it a ton, but we're hoping to try to get it back on the menu more often.
Watching customer after customer order food, seeing sold out posts on Instagram every day, this is clearly a very successful business. It's easy to forget how hard it is to start a business nowadays, much less a barbecue business, started by a relative newcomer to the scene. Really more like a total outsider.
We've had our fair share of really, really hard times. After quitting my job, I mean, I cashed out my 401k. We sold one of our cars. Like we were selling possessions in our house to keep it going, you know, and it just felt like that's what God was calling us to do. And so we just kept finding money where we could find money, you know, and there was times where, I mean, we probably almost called it quits probably 3 or 4 times throughout that year, where it was a pop-up and that pop-up paid for that week's groceries, and we saved enough money week to week to pay for rent or for our mortgage, and that was it. You know, it was no There was no money left over. There was no money to save. We were taking out loans. We were maxing out credit cards. We didn't have the money to get in any type of brick and mortar situation. We didn't have the money to lease out a building or open a restaurant, because real estate around here is just absolutely crazy. And so we made the hard decision to sell our house. Luckily, Custom Trailer Pros out of Kansas City, Missouri, built us a trailer. They'd already had a trailer on the lot, and they were like, yeah, we can get you one. And we were looking for something big because we needed a restaurant on wheels, you know, and we ended up getting a 32-foot trailer and getting it outfitted with all the equipment we need. But I mean, that was a $100,000 food truck, and we're like, how in the world are we gonna get a loan for this? Because we could barely, I could barely get a $1,000 credit line for a credit card, you know? If we really wanted to do this, the only way we were gonna make it reality is if we sold our house. I would say 102% of that profit from the house went to buying the food truck.
There was no turning back. Like, our entire savings, every penny earned was in this business, and that was a risk at all.
When we had gotten the food truck up and rolling, I was working 16, 17-hour days. I mean, I was here at 5 o'clock in the morning, getting briskets on, doing this, doing that. I was here that early, and I was going home at like 4 or 5 o'clock to have dinner and put the kids to bed and try to spend an hour with my wife. And then I was back in the car, and I was back up here by 7, 8 o'clock to pull briskets off the smoker and teach Hunter how to run the pits. And I was here till 3 every one of those days, you know? So I was working from 5 a.m. to 3 a.m. and it was crazy. The most recent time my truck got possessed was actually last summer, probably June timeframe of 2023. We were serving customers, and tow truck pulls in, backs up to my truck and takes it. And I'm just like, I'm in the middle of serving a customer, and I see out of the corner of my eye my truck getting taken, you know, and I had to keep my composure and finish out that customer and get them their food, you know.
I don't think there was ever a time that I was scared, just because of how much I trust in Nick's decisions to provide for our family. And even if things weren't going to work out, I just knew that God put that on his heart. God gave him that desire. And if this was the path that he wanted us to take, as the doors open, just keep going through them.
So we've got one brisket ready to go.
Wait a minute.
Yeah.
Paper sticking to the table, not flying around with all these fans. Is there a hack here?
Yeah, so if you spray the table down before you put the paper down, it sticks. We learned that the hard way after like being in storms out here, and the paper was blowing everywhere. Right. And we figured if we just spray the table down, it sticks down, and it works pretty well.
Can't tell you how much paper or foil I have chased, so that's good.
It works with foil too.
That's a good hack.
But I also spray the top of the paper just so it's nice and pliable.
And this is the same ACV water that we were spritzing the briskets with. Now,
like,
this wrap is different. We're wrapping at a different point. We're not done cooking yet.
Yeah, we're not done. We're not done cooking yet. So this guy is very close. He had a pretty good amount of fat on it that we could feel. And so what we're looking for, so I don't know if you can see it on the camera, but how squishy this fat is all the way around, especially on the lean. Mm-hmm. This fat will render a lot faster than this stuff does for whatever reason. I think just because there's not as much fat underneath it. But once you get that nice pillowy softness, you kind of pinch it back a little bit, and there's like a little bit of caramel color in there. So right when we wrap it, so we put a couple tablespoons of tallow on the top.
Just a little bit.
Just a little bit.
And you're putting it on top.
So you're not on top.
Like the big trend now is tallow underneath.
Yeah.
That's not
we don't
well in foil, right? So you actually want the tallow to get into the meat.
Yeah. We've noticed if we put it on top, I don't know if it's the oil on top of the brisket or whatnot, but it kind of accelerates the cook. And so we'll do that so that way you get it wrapped back up and get it back on the smoker so we can get it finished quicker rather than later.
Okay.
But we're literally just kind of hitting it just like that. Just enough to kind of get the top a little bit wet.
Right.
And then we're gonna wrap it up. Kind of pull it up, tuck the corners in, pull it tight, and then just fold this underneath.
And the tightness is because we don't want extra air in there. We want this to be tallow and brisket and paper.
Yeah, we don't want a bunch of room for steam to collect, and
Okay.
which because of when we're wrapping it, we're not wrapping after the stall, we're not wrapping at the beginning of the stall, we're
Right.
wrapping when we're satisfied with the fat render. The reason we do it at this stage is, for one I've already hit on a couple times, the fat's rendered on top.
Right.
The next thing we got to worry about is rendering out that collagen.
Right.
So if you've ever had a piece of brisket where you go to pull the lean apart and like it's still tender,
Right.
but you've got the white in between kind of connecting
Right.
the fibers, that's all collagen. And so the collagen, like I said earlier, there's one or two ways you can break it down. It's either a long time or it's high temps. That's why
Right.
crock pots work so well, is because they're extended period of time.
Right.
Briskets, you don't want it going 16, 18 hours because you run the risk of drying stuff out. Stuff
Right.
gets real crispy. So because of that, we're cooking slightly above 300. Once we
Right.
get most of them wrapped, if not all of them wrapped, we'll probably bump to 315.
Okay.
And we're aiming the flat at the fire. So the reason we're wrapping is just to protect.
So that protects
to
the
protect
flat,
it.
allows us to go to a temperature we wouldn't normally consider for
Right.
brisket and still be safe.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Makes sense.
Yep. And so when we put it back on the smoker, we'll just make sure we got the flat side towards the fire. And we'll just put him right back kind of where he was. We've already got a handful in there already done. All of them, all the flats are facing the fire.
Right.
But we noticed that it kind of helps even that brisket out.
Okay.
If we flip them too early without wrapping, the flats get a little rough.
Right.
Get a little dried out or a little crispy.
Okay. Sounds great. So now we wait until briskets are ready to start coming off, which is
Yep.
about how long in the wrap typically?
Depends.
In order of magnitude.
Yeah, I would say an hour and a half, 2 hours.
Okay.
Some will go longer, some will go less than that.
Okay.
This guy will be a lot less than that because he already felt
Right.
almost done. So.
And some of these others are wrapped already, so at some point we'll start checking those and you'll tell us how to tell
Exactly.
when it's time to come out?
Yep.
Okay, so we'll be back when it's time to start checking the ones that are already wrapped to see if they're done.
Yep.
All right, so what are we doing?
We're gonna check the beef for the Italian beef. It's looking like it's about ready. So yeah, we're right about where we want to be.
The 130.
130, 132. Yeah, we're gonna
Is
go
that
ahead
about
and
where you
pull it.
usually pull it?
Yep.
Okay.
So now what I'm just gonna put it back on here for a minute. I'm gonna go get the plastic wrap so we can wrap it up.
Okay.
And the way that we'll do it is kind of true to form. We'll take it and wrap it in plastic wrap and let it kind of like steam and cool off in the fridge, cool it down as quickly as we can so it doesn't keep cooking.
Cool.
All right, so we've got brisket here that is done.
Okay.
I'm just gonna show you kind of how we go about feeling to make sure it's done and to show you kind of how I check them because we go based on feel, not based on temperature. If I took a temp, it's around some parts are 205, some parts are 202, some parts maybe 200.
Okay.
Just kind of varying how thin and how thick it is, but it feels done.
So this is another difference between what we're hearing from the big barbecue joints in Texas now
Yeah.
and what you're doing is you're taking it all the way to done. You'll explain to us how it doesn't end up overdone in the warmer.
Yep.
So how do we know?
So whenever it's on the pit, I'll kind of put my hands underneath here and kind of feel the lean and feel how kind of soft it is. The lean's always going to take longer than the point. So the point is very clearly done as well,
Right.
just with how soft it is. But something that helps a lot, especially if you're using butcher paper, is unfolding this bottom layer.
Okay.
Just kind of putting it on top and then just kind of running your fingers along the bottom. So kind of what we're looking for is this like kind of soft, kind of not quite, I don't like the term spongy because spongy has like
Right.
a sense of resistance.
Yeah.
It's not pushing back on me, but it feels soft. Just kind of delicately kind of feel how
I
loose the
can.
muscle fibers are.
Yeah. So like I'm used to the whole probe tender thing
Yeah.
and I can feel with my fingers that this would be
Yeah,
probe tender, but it's more than that. I'm able to manipulate
yeah,
the meat a little bit, right? The grains are running this way and I can feel the grains. I could separate them if I wanted to. So that's what I'm looking for.
That's what you're looking
So I should be able to grab this off of here, pick it up right at kind of where the flat and point come together.
yep,
So this is a done brisket. Like this would be if
Yep.
we were doing a, the towel in a cooler rest for 2 hours, this would be it. But we're
Yep.
doing a long rest.
yep. So we're doing a longer rest. How we kind of combat that is instead of like, we're not throwing a ton of tallow in there, we're not holding it with foil,
Right.
and we're pulling them off at a later temperature. So the way we kind of combat that is we're gonna let these guys cool off almost till exactly 140. So we'll put them in the warmer around 143, 145, maybe a little bit less.
So it's gonna take hour and a half, 2 hours,
yeah,
probably.
it takes a couple hours.
All right.
So we'll let the carryover cooking completely finish. And then if we let it go down to 140 and then we put it in the warmer at 140, they hold as is.
So I'm gonna keep that texture and it's not gonna become pot roast like I was when I did it.
Hopefully.
All right, so I think I know what I'm doing. So we're gonna let this rest. Anything else we're gonna do to it, or just we're gonna rest it and then in?
So we're gonna rest it, and then once it hits that temp we're looking for, we'll wrap them in saran wrap and then throw them in.
So wrap the whole paper assembly in
so
saran
the whole
wrap.
thing, wrap it real tight in saran wrap.
Okay.
Just kind of locks in any remaining moistures. It doesn't steam for the whole night.
Right.
It traps all that in there, and it provides a juicier brisket at the end of the rest.
I'm looking forward to trying to replicate this, but you know what I'm looking forward to more than that? Tasting it in the morning.
Oh yeah.
When we get back here and it's had that opportunity to rest. All right, so we don't need to stick around. We'll let you finish all of this.
Yep.
And then we'll be back before the sun comes up again tomorrow, right? And
bright and early.
Bright and early, keep going with what we're doing and get to the finish line.
Yep.
All right, thanks, man.
Yeah, of course, buddy.
As darkness fell and the briskets began their long overnight rest, and I couldn't help but think, it takes a special kind of team to persevere through the insane hours, financial hardships, and the lingering fear that all of this might be for naught, and still see the light at the end of the tunnel. Teams like Kimmy and Nick just don't come along every day.
I don't know. I think me and Kimmy are so comfortable with risk. I don't know why. It's just how we're wired, you know? I understood kind of the situation I was putting my family in, but I felt called to do this. And I think ultimately that calling superseded my worries.
I was born in New York City, but I spent 2 decades of my life in Chicago, where the Chicago Italian beef sandwich, what locals call a beef juicy, is as much a part of the food culture as Chicago dogs or deep dish pizza. I'm baffled that I never learned to make this wonderful staple. I think this might be the dish I'm most excited about learning from Nick. All right, top of the morning.
Good morning.
We let the sun come up a little bit before rolling the cameras.
Got a
but
few
that's
hours
okay.
of sleep.
Got a little bit of sleep. We're all refreshed and ready to go. So what's first on our agenda?
So first we need to get the au jus going for the Italian beef.
For the Italian beef, okay.
So we're gonna have, it's gonna cook for about 40 minutes or so. So we just wanna get that rolling so that way it doesn't fall behind and we forget about it. So we'll go ahead and get started with the vegetables. It's not a whole ton. We just got some celery. We got some carrots that we'll have to go get in a minute. Onion and garlic. And then we'll just get this kind of roughly chopped up. There's nothing crazy about it. All of it's going to end up getting strained. We'll just go right into the stock.
So we're
pot.
doing this the way that you would do a bone broth or homemade stock.
Yep.
Where,
Yep.
all right.
So we do go with a pretty good amount of garlic.
Okay.
I think I'll put all 3 heads in there. You want the jus to be very, very flavorful and very, very salty. So that way when it all kind of comes together, you get the oil from the giardiniera, you get all that stuff, it kind of mellows out and it all kind of comes together real well.
We haven't talked to them about giardiniera yet. We've talked about this beef sandwich and showed them the meat, but that's a big part of the story too,
It
right?
is. So we already have some made, but I'll talk through kind of what that is, kind of once we get done with this, I'll pull that out and we can talk through kind of what's all in there, how we go about making it. I mean, really all giardiniera really means is pickled garden, you know, so it's really any kind of vegetables you want to throw in there. But traditionally it's a lot of celery, a lot of cauliflower, peppers. We got some serranos in there. We got carrots in there.
Nice.
So it's just a good mix, and we chop it pretty fine so that way it's not super clumpy on top of the sandwich.
Right.
And then, then after you're done pickling it, we drain out all the vinegar and then we substitute it with oil. So we'll do a mix of vegetable oil and olive oil, like a real high quality olive oil. All right, so I do throw the entire onion skin in though.
Okay.
So I kind of cut the end off and
Right.
lost that, but I'll just quarter it and then throw.
1 onion. Okay.
So now that this is all in here, we'll go ahead and get this on the stove, throw a little bit of oil in there so it can start. Actually, I'll probably throw in some beef tallow in there and just letting that all kind of caramelize a little bit. So we're kind of at the end of the like braising period for the veggies.
Okay, so they've been on about a half hour.
So we've got a nice caramelized on the bottom, and most of the veggies are getting really soft. So what we're gonna do first is we're gonna take those whole spices, these ones right here. So this is our about 15 grams of coriander and 15 grams of fennel seed.
Okay.
So we're gonna toast, just kind of make a little hole in the bottom of the pot, toss them in,
Okay.
and just let them toast a little bit here in the bottom of the pot until you start to really kind of smell the aromatics. We're gonna go in with the rest of this bouillon paste.
Okay.
So that's because we didn't have any of the beef kind of braising in
Okay.
the pan. That's gonna give us that like rich, kind of beefy, salty flavor
Okay.
that we're missing.
This is about a third of this jar.
Yeah.
Right. So call it 3 ounces of.
Yeah,
of
give
bouillon.
or take. We're just gonna go in and kind of cook it for a couple seconds. So it'll kind of start to melt and incorporate into all the veggies. All right, so like it should kind of look like that consistency.
Oh, that aroma is starting to really develop now.
Yeah. We'll go in with the first thing of bone broth. So just want to grab one of those.
All right, so we got 2 of these bone broths.
Yep.
Now you're using a premium bone broth. Do you use that every day?
So this is the one that we use for the Italian beef, yes.
Okay.
It's not, we don't use it exclusively because we'll use about 6 or 7 of these.
Okay.
So I'll use 2 of these for every 5 of like a different like beef stock.
Okay.
Doesn't all need to be the bone broth. Then once again, don't buy any low sodium stocks because you want.
That'd be like buying vegan stock.
We're gonna go ahead and add the rest of our spices.
Okay, so let's talk through what's in this spice mix.
So we've got about 10 to 15, depending on how spicy you want it. About 10 to 15 grams of red pepper flake. We got 15 grams of oregano, 15 grams of garlic and onion powder, and then we've got 15 grams of black pepper as well.
Okay.
And that's it. So let's get this all mixed in. Once it's all in there and incorporated, we'll turn the heat up to just below high and start letting it boil. And then we'll reduce it down just like a touch, like until it shrinks down like maybe an inch in the pot.
Right.
And then it's good to go. I'm not really trying to reduce it into a sauce or anything. I'm just trying to allow everything to come together.
Okay.
And I noticed whenever we allow it to reduce a little bit, the flavor's a little bit more concentrated.
Okay, so we're just gonna get a little bit of it steamed off.
Exactly. So the last ingredient we're going to throw in is some wishbone Italian seasoning. This is something we did the Italian beef for Windy City Smokeout, and when we were prepping for the event, I was talking to a lot of the executive chef and everything, and he said this is the secret to like a real authentic Chicago Italian beef, is they use exclusively wishbone Italian seasoning in the jus. So we're going to add 2 small containers of it into the jus, and this is just going to give it a little bit of acidity, a little bit more of those Italian seasonings, and it does make a big difference. The week we added this to it, we noticed a pretty distinct difference in the flavor. So I definitely recommend trying it out. So as we finish off the jus, we're going to go ahead and slice the beef.
Okay.
And so this stuff we smoked yesterday. We let it chill in the fridge. Partly we needed it to be cold when we slice it, and also it allows that smoke to kind of intensify. And so we're going to go ahead and get that sliced, and then when someone orders it, we're going to dip it in the jus to reheat it, and then we'll put it on the sandwich.
All right, so we don't have to slice a hot roast beef.
No.
Which is a pain in the neck.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, so this is right out of the fridge into the slicer.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yep.
How thin or thick are we slicing?
So we'll kind of gauge how we're going to do it real quick. We're about at a, what is that, 1.5 millimeter. This is roughly kind of what you're looking for. You want it nice and thin to where you can kind of see the light through it. So that way, once you kind of put it in your mouth, it just kind of melts. So that way, if you hit some pieces maybe where there's a little bit more fat or something like that, it's nice and tender when it's on the sandwich. But we'll just go through and slice the rest of it like this, and then we'll do more with it once it's time to make a sandwich. So all we're gonna do is just strain it out
Okay.
now that it's done cooking.
Good.
Just to get all the stuff out of it. All right, so we'll just kind of shake it around and shake it around and shake it around. So I'm just gonna discard this, and then we'll do the next round. And then we'll just do it again and strain. Yep. All right. So that's all of it. Alrighty, and then we'll just hold this here until we're ready to make a sandwich. So to make the Italian beef, after we've kind of prepped all the different ingredients, we have the beef here in the fridge that's already been sliced, and throw it into the hot jus. We'll mix it in and kind of stir it around in there, just make sure it's all broken up and all that, and leave it to be for about 20 seconds or so while we get the bun ready, get the meat out and load it into the bun. And then once we've got all the meat here in the bun, we dip it fully into the jus, so it's fully submerged. And we don't hold it there for any time, we just pull it right out. And then once we're done with that, we're pretty much done. We just throw our house-made giardiniera on there, and then we roll it up into wax paper so it can kind of all combine. And then, yeah, we hand it to the customer like that.
Dude, this brisket looks maybe like it's better than the briskets that we had before. What if the ones that you and I did ended up being the best briskets?
Yeah.
Just look at that. This is it's perfect. Perfect amount of salt, perfect amount of pepper. The flat is juicy.
Yeah.
I gotta tell you, man, I have tasted what the industry calls the best briskets on the planet. And they're good, and I'm not turning any of those away, but you're putting more work into this. You're spritzing and you're checking and you're pulling the fat apart and you're wrapping at a weird time that nobody else.
Yeah.
It works. I mean, this is a better product. You know, Daniel Vaughn said you were the best brisket in North Carolina, hands down. You might have higher standing than that.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, I appreciate it.
I
appreciate it.
This is the close to my heart one. All right, let's see how we did. You ready?
All right, let's do it.
It's so good. You're taking it up another level with the smoke.
Yeah.
I mean, I can taste the smoke, but the beef juicy is not lost on me.
Yeah. Yeah, it
Dude,
definitely adds I feel like a much needed element to it, you know. It just creates a little bit more depth within a sandwich that already has so much flavor, you know.
It's something that's needed that you didn't even know you needed.
Yeah.
Right? And you're taking it up a level. And this, now you made this in Chicago at the Windy City Smokeout.
We did.
Right?
We
No
did.
pressure.
Yeah. I know people were definitely a little skeptical, but I mean, it went over super, super well, and everyone that tried it loved it. And it was funny, a lot of the workers that were like working the dock in the back or working the refrigerators and all that were coming over pretty much every day to get an Italian beef. And so I think we won the hearts of the Chicago folk, you know.
All right, well, Nick, I got to congratulate you. This is good, and I guess I can't shake your hand after holding this, but a wave, or there we go, fist bump.
Yeah.
Thank you a lot.
Of course, thank you. Looking back as like a third and fourth grader, you know, watching guys playing the NFL, what kind of kid doesn't dream of playing in the NFL? And I was always much larger than all the other kids. And so that was something I always had and always prayed for, you know, to have a stage to make a difference in some way, shape, or form. I didn't know what that meant. I didn't know what that was. I think those kind of came to be answered, like those prayers through this, you know, like never in a million years would I think I'd have a following in barbecue like I do, you know, to be invited all over the country to rub shoulders with people and have people like you guys come out and film documentaries about our food and about our story. And I think in a weird, like, roundabout way, like, this was what I was hoping for as a little kid.
As the sun sets on this little slice of barbecue paradise near my new home in North Carolina, I can't help but feel an incredible sense of pride. Pride in Nick and Kimmy, who had, for all intents and purposes, already realized the American dream, but still took the risk to start this crazy venture so they could turn the dream into their dream. I also feel pride in my new North Carolina community for standing behind and supporting entrepreneurs like Nick. And last but certainly not least, pride in having the good fortune to live in one of the few places on earth where a Nick Dampf or one of you, or maybe even I, could turn whatever crazy dream we have into our very own American dream.